President Trump is taking on the national and global establishment. Reports claim that Elon Musk thinks it's a good idea for former Congressman Ron Paul, author of End the Fed, to lead an audit team at DOGE with a focus on examining the Federal Reserve. Wow. Well, folks, we're going to analyze Satan's master plan for the world on this edition of the Endtime Show. Good afternoon, everybody. I'm Dave Robbins with Endtime Ministries. Thank you so much for joining me on this edition of the Endtime Show. Now, we've talked about it many times, and a lot of you know about Satan's master plan. But because we have so many new viewers and people viewing us all over the world, I kind of wanted to cover some of this today because President Trump, Elon Musk, many of the other new people in the government, in Donald Trump's administration, are going down these roads as we speak to try to come against the international and the national establishment. A lot of time we talk about a national establishment, but there's a global establishment, a global deep state. And it's all tying into world government. It's eventually going to be the world government of the Antichrist. The Antichrist will lord over this entire system. And so it's the system that has been being established for well over 100 years. And I want to talk to you about it today. So what's going on? Well, former Congressman Ron Paul, of course, a prominent critic of the Federal Reserve for years, and he's consistently pushed for more transparency in its operations. And his potential role at DOGE, he hasn't committed to anything, but it could significantly challenge the Federal Reserve, and it dovetails in with President Trump's administration's agenda to improve government efficiency and to cut down on waste, right? Well, this move could herald a new era in the supervision of the U.S. Central Bank. Elon Musk is just brash enough to come against that, right? I don't know if he'll be successful, and you'll understand why here in just a little bit. However, last week, a federal judge in New York issued a temporary block on DOGE's access to the Treasury Department's payment system. Well, why would they do that? Why do you think? Why not just have complete transparency in the federal government? Well, it's because people have things to hide, right? And Donald Trump has given him permission to be in there and access. So, but a federal judge said, nope, it's not going to happen. And of course, this is amid resistance from establishment figures intent on maintaining their secrecy around alleged fraudulent activities. Well, Elon Musk's consideration of former Congressman Ron Paul underscores his commitment to federal reform and could intensify scrutiny on the Federal Reserve's practices. And, you know, auditing the Federal Reserve, it's something that Ron Paul, he's been pushing for decades. And to quote Ron Paul, he said this: "There is no authority in the Constitution authorizing a central bank," which means there should be no Federal Reserve system. And that is an absolutely true statement. The Federal Reserve, along with the global system of central banks and the Bank for International Settlements, is part of Satan's master plan in the end time. You say, whoa, Dave, you made a big leap from just talking about government and DOGE and Ron Paul to Satan's master plan. That is exactly what I'm talking about, and that's why I wanted to talk about it with you today. Because we have so many new listeners and people following us from everywhere, I want to make sure everybody understands when I talk about the Federal Reserve and the establishment, the deep state, what we're really talking about here, because President Trump is coming against that in many ways. So that's what we're going to deal with here today on the program, and I think you'll learn some new stuff about what's going on here. However, let me first talk to you about Birch Gold. We're talking about money right today, right? So, of course, many of us have been holding our breath for the last several months. You know, who was going to get elected? What's going to happen? Is inflation going to just absolutely go off the charts? And, we're all wondering, right? But now we can kind of exhale. President Trump's in. He's got Elon Musk over DOGE, and he's going through the system and trying to cut spending. And, I mean, he's found some stuff that is just unbelievable that we've been giving taxpayer money to. I'm talking about tens and tens and tens of millions of dollars. So work can finally be done on the major issues that our country is facing, especially our national debt. Unreal, 36 trillion plus. And the fact is, folks, our nation is broke. And that certainly is something that can't be paid off overnight, right? So the strategy remains the same. You've got to control your savings the best you can. And if you're going to invest, you've got to invest and diversify your savings. That's why we recommend birchgold.com/endtime. And there's many things right now about gold is, near, if not at an all-time high. You have to see how it is from day to day, month to month. But the thing is, central banks are buying up gold like there's no tomorrow. Well, why is that? Well, because gold, very important, right? It's been a currency for thousands of years. So it's important to protect what you can, especially your savings. And there's many things that are out of our control, many things out of President Trump's control. And so that's why, Birch Gold Group, they can help you convert an IRA or a 401k into an IRA in physical gold. The best news is it doesn't cost you a penny out of pocket. So protect your savings with Birch Gold visit birchgold.com/endtime. All right, so let's get into Satan's master plan. Now, some of you may have heard this before. My father-in-law did a lesson years ago called Satan's master plan. And I wanted to cover some of that information today because Donald Trump is coming against this. I mean, he's hitting at the heart of it in many ways. And they're not too happy about it, right? You can only imagine these people trying to retain power with everything they're worth, and they would be willing to go into a world war to retain that power, I promise you. I was talking with my production guys before we came on the radio, and we were talking about Ron Paul and Elon Musk potentially, I don't know if this will happen, but potentially auditing or abolishing the Fed. And I told him, I said, Sam, these guys, I promise you, would be willing to go to World War III before they would relinquish power, the power that they have. And we had a great conversation over that. So it's something that we're talking about. And I want you to understand what really is going on and the dynamics that are happening in Washington. So when we talk about Satan's master plan, Revelation chapter 13 lays out Satan's master plan for the end time. World government, world religion, and a global economic sanctioning system referred to as the mark of the beast. That's Satan's master plan. His ultimate goal is the world government. That's the kingdom that he is establishing on the earth to get people to bow down to his edicts and to pledge allegiance, thereby worshiping him. His representative on the earth will be the Antichrist. He will do the persecuting. He will do everything through the Antichrist. But if a person was to pledge allegiance and worship the Antichrist, that would be to worship Satan himself. And the Bible says in Revelation 13 that they will worship the dragon, which is Satan, in the end time. Everyone whose name is not written in the Lamb's Book of Life. So, Satan's master plan. In America, it was launched in between 1913 and 1921. There were three institutions that were born in that time period. The first one was the economic institution that controls the economy in 2025, everybody. It's called the Federal Reserve Bank. It's our central bank, and its job was to gain control of the economy, to take it away from Congress and to put it in the hands of a cartel of bankers, a cabal of private bankers. In 1916, the Brookings Institute was born, and it's basically a think tank that produces the policies for the government, plus the talking points for all the major media in order to tell the American population what we should all be worried about, what we should be thinking about, what we should be mad about or happy about. It's a think tank, and they're trying to manipulate the thought process of the American people. So you can imagine how upset they are that President Trump is coming against all of that and saying, hey, this is America first, and we're going to make America great again. And the American people start to become proud to be Americans again after 4 years of Joe Biden. And people think, hey, I'm proud to be here. We're going to protect our borders. We're protecting Israel. And, we're cutting off all of this crazy spending from USAID and many other places in the government. And so, hey, man, it's, I'm going to sit up a little straighter. I'm proud to be an American again, right? But the Brookings Institute, it's a think tank, and it has now become the number one liberal think tank in America, even providing papers for the government. In 1921, the Council on Foreign Relations was born, and now the Council on Foreign Relations is designed to crank out politicians, people that will actually be the politicians that rule the government, and to establish policies to move us into a one world governing body. Now, again, you can see how President Trump is coming against all of this. The think tanks, the economy, and the politicians in Washington. He's coming against the entire system, everybody. And you're watching it play out in the news every day. This is what's going on. one man that participated in the starting of all three organizations. It was a man named Warburg. And on today's program, I'll be talking about him, but on today's program, I want to focus on just the Federal Reserve. We'll talk about the Brookings Institute and the Council on Foreign Relations, the Trilateral Commissions. We'll talk about all that later on another program. But today I want to focus just on the Federal Reserve and why it's so important that Elon Musk either audit or, better yet, abolish the Federal Reserve altogether. And then also, and that's here in the United States, and then also, if we have time, we'll get into President Trump and what he's doing on a global scale. So the Federal Reserve is designed for the economy, to control the economy. The Brookings Institute, that's designed for the belief system. The Council on Foreign Relations is designed to control the government system through the politicians that they put there. They're plants. They're groomed to take those positions because they're going to be yes men, whether Republican or Democrat. And I believe there are some good people up there, especially a lot of the people that President Trump is surrounding himself with. But a vast majority of the politicians are career politicians, and the only way they stay that way is to be yes men to the system. So one man was responsible for helping at the beginning of all of this, and that was Mr. Paul Warburg. Mr. Warburg, he was a member of M&M Warburg and Company. It was a banking family, one of the most powerful banking firms in Europe. And all the way back in 1895, Warburg married a girl named Nina Loeb, L-O-E-B. She was a daughter of a guy named Solomon Loeb. And he was the founder of Kuhn, Loeb and Company. And it was one of the largest banks in America. And this formed an alliance between, now you've heard talk of bloodlines and all this stuff. A lot of that stuff's very true. They would intermingle their kids to keep all this stuff in certain families and different bloodlines, okay? So this formed an alliance between what was probably the largest banking firm in Europe, and that's the Warburg and Company, and Kuhn, Loeb and Company here in the United States of America. So jump forward to 1902. Warburg moved to the United States, and hey, he's got a job waiting on him, right? He became a partner in Kuhn, Loeb and Company, which was his son-in-law's dad. Well, he also remained a partner in the Warburg family firm back in Hamburg, Germany. So he's a key player in Germany, of course in Europe, because Germany is the heart of Europe, and he's a key player here in the United States at that point. Well, because of his outstanding knowledge, people thought that he was the most knowledgeable person about banking on the earth. And because of his outstanding banking knowledge, he quickly became very influential in banking circles here in the United States of America. He wasn't even a United States citizen at this point. Now think about this. Now, also upon arriving in America, he devoted himself to writing papers about why America should have a central bank. Well, now, we had resisted since all the way back since 1776. We have been resisting a central bank because our forefathers understood that if you get a central bank that can control all of the economy, the economics of a nation, that they will soon enslave the people. So the American people had bitterly fought against that, and all the way back to our forefathers, and it had been tried several times, but we never would allow it to happen. Well, here comes Mr. Paul Warburg, and he began to write these very persuasive papers as to why we should, in fact, have a central bank system here in the United States of America. And soon, he acquired a very powerful ally, and the guy's name was Senator Nelson Aldrich. He was from Rhode Island. Now, you may recognize the name Nelson Aldrich because his daughter married John D. Rockefeller. Remember, these guys they're intermarrying their kids so that way they can have these alliances, right? And their son was named Nelson Aldrich Rockefeller, who then became vice president of the United States of America. So you can see how all of this plays out over time, right? That's how they retain power. Anyway, Warburg acquired this very powerful ally, Senator Nelson Aldrich of Rhode Island, and he was the czar of the Republican Party and chairman of the Senate Finance Committee. So for years, Republican or Democrat, okay, it didn't matter. And it actually still really doesn't matter today. I mean, President Trump, he's a Republican, but there are still Republicans that are rhinos, Republican in name only. They're going to vote with the Democrats when it's needed. They'll vote with the Republicans when they think, it's no big deal. I'll vote with the Republicans this time. But when it's something that's really needed at some point, they'll be called on by their fathers, let's say, to vote Democrat because they're Republican in name only. It's not how they really believe. So these people wanted a central bank. That was the goal because they got to get control of the economy of America, right? But there was so much opposition to it, they decided that they had to do things in secret. So back in November of, I can always remember this date because my grandpa was born this year. It was November of 1910. And one of them said, hey, I got an idea. Let's all go on a fake hunting trip. Because none of them hunted. And everybody watched everything these powerful bankers did. They were just under the public's eye. And so they had to be very careful. So what they did, they all got guns and gun cases, and they dressed up in their little gun hunting outfits, and everybody thought, man, these guys are really going hunting. And they all got on a train that was owned by Aldrich, and they go out to this secret meeting on an island just off the coast of Georgia called Jekyll Island. Now, folks, all of this is documented. A lot of people say, well, this is conspiracy theory. There's no conspiracy theory to this. This is the absolute truth. You can read G. Edward Griffin's book, A Creature from Jekyll Island. He spent 7 years writing the book, documented everything I'm telling you. He's got newspaper clippings. I mean, he's got it all laid out in intricate detail. That's why he's one of my literary heroes, really. Well, all of this under the guise of this duck hunt, which was totally fake, Senator Aldrich, Paul Warburg, and 4 other experts, they sneaked off to discuss bank reform at this secret hideaway on Jekyll Island off the coast of Georgia, right down here in the United States. And those in attendance included Harry Davidson of Morgan Bank, Frank Vanderlip of National City Bank, Benjamin Strong, he was vice president of Bankers Trust Company, and Piatt Andrew, he was a former secretary of the National Monetary Commission, and at that point was the assistant secretary of the Treasury. And so that was back, back in 1910. So the real purpose of this historic fake duck hunt was to formulate a plan for U.S. banking and currency reform that Aldrich could present to Congress, because up until that point, Congress had the power to control the economy here in America. But Aldrich came, and remember, it had to go through Congress, it had to go through the House, and then go through the Senate, and then the president had to sign off on it, right? Well, Aldrich, he come up with this plan. Here's what you're going to present to Congress. In order to establish a central bank here in America, we're going to make the American people think that it's in their best interest to have a central bank, when it wasn't then, and it certainly isn't now. Well, at this secret meeting on Jekyll Island, which happened, again, back in November 1910, during that secret meeting of the powerful banking interest, the general outline for the Federal Reserve Act was determined. And poor Paul Warburg, remember, not even a U.S. citizen yet, was the principal architect of the Federal Reserve Act. The purpose of the Federal Reserve Act was to take control away from Congress to control the economy and America's money in the hand, and to place it in the hands of these private bankers. And if passed, the Federal Reserve Board would be able to set the interest rates and determine the amount of money in circulation. Now, today, that's the way it still runs, everybody. All the, what are we now, 115 years later. Actually, the Federal Reserve Act wasn't signed until 2013. So 112 years later, 113 years later. So up until that point, it was the job of Congress. And it's in our Constitution that Congress is to set the interest rates, that Congress is to determine the amount of money in circulation, and that's how you regulate the economy. But it's now going to be taken from them, take that power away from Congress, and put it in the hands of these private bankers and private hands. It's very important. Has nothing to do with the government. That's why President Trump came in the other day and told Jerome Powell of the Federal Reserve, lower your interest rates, and they ignored him. And there's not one thing President Trump can do about it. Think about that. So when the news comes out and says Elon Musk thinks it's a good idea that former Congressman Ron Paul work with him to audit the Fed, and Ron Paul would love to abolish the Fed, I'm sitting there looking at it going like, you've got to be kidding me. This would be awesome. I don't know if they'll be able to pull it off, but it's something that you need to be watching, because I want you to understand the background of all of this. And because most people, you say the Federal Reserve, and they're like, that's that big building somewhere in America, and not 100% sure what they do, but they're untouchable. They are untouchable. The Federal Reserve runs our government. It's not our government running the Federal Reserve. President Trump cannot go in there and say, I want it done like this and that. No, doesn't work like that. So, if you remember, there was a guy named Mayer Amschel Rothschild. Many of you have heard of the Rothschild banking family. Well, Mayer Amschel Rothschild, he made this famous statement, and I'm quoting him. He said, "You give me control of a nation's money, and I care not who makes her laws." And there is, these individuals were grasping for control of America's money. Now, I said the other day on the radio that the USAID and all of the unbelievable, horrible spending, we were giving money to feed Al-Qaeda and terrorist organizations. And I mean, it's unreal, everybody. If we ever get to the very bottom of it all, it's going to be hundreds and hundreds and probably trillions. And we'll have to see how all that plays out. However, I want you to know the USAID is a drop in the bucket compared to what the Federal Reserve has been able to do in controlling America's money. Creating money from, you talk about creating inflation. The Federal Reserve can create money out of thin air, everybody. They can print money like there's no tomorrow. There's no gold backing it. There's no silver backing it. It's just created out of thin air and then loan it to our government. Okay? And that puts tons of money into circulation, and there's much more supply than there is demand. There's much more demand than there is supply, and that drives the prices up. You see? Inflation. So they create for inflation, and then they say, well, the Federal Reserve is working to control inflation. No, they're not. I want you guys to understand the truth of all of this, because President Trump and Elon Musk, and I would love to have Ron Paul come and to audit and to abolish the Fed. Give Congress, our Constitution, our forefathers wrote it that the Congress would have the power to do this. but they don't anymore because of the Federal Reserve Act. And I just want everybody to understand what's going on, because this global cabal, this global establishment is prophesied about in Scripture. The Federal Reserve Act is part of that, the Federal Reserve Bank in America. So it's something we certainly ought to be watching, because we don't really want that here in America at all. They control our economy.
A reminder of the breaking news this hour. At least 22 people are reported to have died in a strike in Gaza.
The rise of Islam.
We're trying to bring answers for so many families desperately.
Is the Israel-Hamas-Iran conflict World War III? So let's talk about the four horsemen. What do these horses symbolize? These are the four spirits of the heavens which go forth from standing before the Lord of all the earth. In the end time, the true people of God will not be weak, anemic, and defeated. These prophesied events are revealing we are quickly approaching the time of the Great Tribulation right now.
Now streaming on OneSource and available to order at endtime.com/screen. Go to endtime.com/screen or call 800-ENDTIME.
What if you could understand Bible prophecy? Dave Robbins, the host of the Endtime Show's TV and radio programs, is holding a free prophecy conference near you. Gain peace and understanding about what the Bible says concerning end-time prophecy. Call 1-800-ENDTIME or go to endtime.com/events to see when Dave will be in a location near you.
Imagine everybody being a president, i.e. President Trump, coming into office, wanting to be America first, to control the border, to control the energy and to produce energy so we would have cheap energy so gas prices would go down, to help control food prices and control inflation, and, just to be America first, to build our manufacturing back up and our energy and be an energy exporter and build up our military and, make sure our schools aren't teaching homosexuality and 14 genders and all kinds of stuff to our kids and indoctrinating with socialism and, dealing with the world government. Imagine being an incoming president and you find that there, and I would, if I was a betting man, I would bet money that President Trump understands the Federal Reserve. If he doesn't, I would be shocked. But knowing that, hey, there's something here that we need to handle, that America doesn't control this banking cartel that is controlled by private people, and we need to get a hold of it. I mean, President Trump's not stupid. He can look at a dollar bill, and it doesn't say a United States note. It says a Federal Reserve note. Now, it's pretty easy to see who's controlling everything. That's why we don't want a central bank digital currency. You understand? President Trump's against it. He signed an executive order. Under my tenure, we will never have a central bank digital currency. Well, that's right in the face of the central bank, the Federal Reserve. So he's got to understand something's going on here. And yet that's the money is at the heart of this thing. The Bible says the love of money is the root of all evil, right? Money's not the root of all evil, but it's the love of that money and the power that comes with it. So that's what these people are willing to do anything to retain control of. There's an interesting quote from the secret meeting that took place out on Jekyll Island. And it was from Frank Vanderlip, who was the president of National City Bank in New York. He said that if it were to be exposed publicly that our particular group, he's talking about those elite bankers, that we had gotten together and written a banking bill that would, and the bill would have, he said there's no way, creating this Federal Reserve Act, He said there's no way that that would have any chance whatsoever of passage by Congress. These guys knew exactly what they were doing out there on Jekyll Island. Again, that was Frank Vanderlip, president of National City Bank in New York. He was one of the guys out there. So what was the outcome of this? Well, the outcome, that was in 2010. It took a while for Aldrich to come back and to get it through Congress and everything and to get it signed. But the outcome on December 23rd, 1913, the Federal Reserve Act was enacted. And the Federal Reserve became an entity. And it became law, I should say. The Federal Reserve Act became law. So stock was owned by private stockholders, and they gave private banking interests control of the United States economy. Mr. Paul Warburg, he was the father of the Federal Reserve. He actually bears that name. And he moved to the United States in 1902, became a partner of Kuhn, Loeb and Company, and he began promoting a central bank, designed the Federal Reserve Act system, November 1910, and he wasn't even a citizen of the United States yet. He was still a citizen of Germany. And in 1911, he became a U.S. citizen, and he was appointed a member of the first Federal Reserve Board by our president, Woodrow Wilson. It was all by grand design, everybody. The master plan to control our economy was imported straight from Europe. And what we tried to get away from, we had fought that from 1776 on. What we tried to get away from, intimately acquainted with European central bankers, we didn't want any part of that, especially the German Reichsbank. Warburg didn't claim to originate new banking practices so much as importing European practices here in America. Now, this was the beginning of what we now call the Federal Reserve Bank in America. In June of 2024, Senator Mike Lee, he was a Republican, oh man, where was he from? Utah. He introduced the Federal Reserve Board Abolition Act to abolish the Federal Reserve. And Representative Massey said this, and I'm quoting, Americans are suffering under crippling inflation, and the Federal Reserve is to blame. And that's an absolute true statement. During COVID, the Federal Reserve created trillions of dollars out of thin air. Remember, we went off the gold standard, backing our money back in the early 70s under Nixon. And I was only, I think 4 or 5 years old when that happened. And so the Federal Reserve can print these notes out like there's no tomorrow, and they do it. There's nothing backing that. Only the good faith in the American people that they'll pay off that debt someday, that we'll stand behind it. That's it. We used to have a gold standard here in America where it was a checks and balances. Again, they could only have so much money out in circulation as we had gold in Fort Knox to back it, right? It's not that way anymore. We went off that gold standard, over 50 years ago now. So during COVID, Representative Massey says, during COVID, the Federal Reserve created trillions of dollars out of thin air and loaned it to the Treasury Department to enable unprecedented deficit spending. And by monetizing that debt, the Federal Reserve devalued the dollar and enabled free money policies that caused the high inflation that we see today. Okay? So Donald Trump came in and said, hey, Jerome Powell, lower your interest rates. And the Fed said, we're just going to ignore you. We don't care what you say, President of the United States. And so in November, this past November, Yahoo Finance reported that Tesla CEO and obviously a vocal Trump backer, Elon Musk, signaled support for expanding presidential authority over the Federal Reserve's policy decisions. Today, President Trump called on the Federal Reserve, again, to lower interest rates in a post on his Truth Social platform. This was today, and it was, following the hotter than expected inflation report. And it was today that Federal Reserve Chair Jerome Powell said that President Trump's calls for lowering interest rates won't lead to the central bank to change anything, its rate decisions. In other words, that they're going to just ignore President Trump. So the president has no control over the Federal Reserve, nor does our Congress. We don't have control of the economy, everybody. A group of private bankers does. And now Elon Musk and DOGE, if he was to get Ron Paul, or if he was to do it without Ron Paul, he would be striking at the very heart of the establishment in America. And if he were to fully audit and to regulate or abolish the Fed, which I would love to see happen, because it's what these people are, a cartel of private bankers that have controlled the economy of America for well over 100 years. Didn't matter if it was Republican or Democrat, none of them could touch the Federal Reserve. Many of them were probably bought and paid for by them and others. They've been groomed by the Council on Foreign Relations and taught how to think by some of these think tanks and different things. There have been the Brookings Institute, I will just mention this, that they have even written speeches for presidents. That's how much they have influenced the American people and had control of what was going on. Okay, why did I talk about this today? Because Revelation chapter 13, Revelation 13, 1 and 2 prophesies of a world government that will be established. This is part of that world government. All of these guys are in cahoots together. They're all working to establish a global banking system, a global government, a global judicial system. They're all working together. Now, they're never going to come out and say, hey, everybody's working together to create a world government and we're going to expose everything. They're never going to do that. But all of these, did you not know that the land that the United Nations is built on up in New York was donated to them by the Rockefeller family? The Rockefeller family was originally part of all these banking interests. And I mean, these people they're all in cahoots together, everybody. So remember, Nelson Aldrich Rockefeller, you know all the acquaintance of all of this. So what about, now that's here in America. Remember, Federal Reserve, Brookings Institute, and there's other think tanks, the Council on Foreign Relations, the Trilateral Commission. There's many of them that are part of this cabal. But it's also part of a global system. You have the central banks around the world, and then at the hub of that is the Bank for International Settlements. And they're the ones that are really driving the central bank digital currencies. I think it's now in 98% of those central banks. This is part of the global cabal that is mentioned in Revelation 13, 1 and 2. Now, what about the international establishment or organizations like the United Nations, the International Monetary Fund, the International Criminal Court, the International Court of Justice, the World Bank, the World Health Organization, the World Trade Organization, the North Atlantic Treaty Organization? That's just to name a few. What are they doing, Dave? They're creating a world government. It's the World Health Organization, the World Trade Organization, the International Monetary Fund. It's not just the United States Monetary Fund. It's the International Monetary Fund. The International Criminal Court. It's not just a criminal court here in the United States. It's the International Criminal Court. What are they trying to do? They're trying to create a world governing body. They got to have an international monetary system. Okay? So, President Trump, he's dealing with all of this here in America, trying to make America great again. But to do that, he's trying to lop off the tentacles of this giant octopus that has its arms wrapped around the world. And so, to make America great again, President Trump realizes he has to come against and resist the establishment here in America that is so ingrained in our society. People think the federal. I had a guy come in my office a few years ago. He had just graduated college, and he had an economics degree. And he come arguing with me that the Federal Reserve was a good thing, and we had to have the Federal Reserve. I said, well, where do they get their money? He goes, now he's got an economics degree. Where do they get their money? I don't know. I said, did you know they print their money out of thin air? Oh, no. I said, well, then where do they get their money? Well, I don't know, but they don't print it out of thin air. That doesn't work. I said, it doesn't work, but they're doing it. Now, hence inflation. He was lost. He had never been taught any of this stuff. And so when we get back from the break here, we're going to talk about what President Trump is doing on an international scale, not just a national scale. It's very important. Many people argue America is not mentioned in the prophecies of the Bible. But they will miss so much about the coming events that will happen in the end time if they don't get that understanding. What do these beasts symbolize? That's what we need to answer. Because if we can't understand what these beasts symbolize, there's no point in even studying this, right? If you don't believe that America is mentioned in the Bible, you're going to be stuck when it comes to figuring out all these prophecies. But once you understand this, America has a prophesied future. It's given to us in the Bible. And the America will not be part of the world government, but we're going to be protecting Israel against the world government all the way to the second coming of Jesus Christ.
Now available for pre-order at endtime.com/America. Go to endtime.com/America or call 1-800-ENDTIME.
So President Trump, in trying to make America great again, he's dealing with an establishment here in America, nationally, but he's also dealing with one on an international level. You know, we've taught many years about the first four seals of the book of Revelation. And it was a Revelation chapter 6, and it was a white horse, a red horse, a black horse, and a green horse. Well, we know and we've taught because of Zechariah chapter 6, verse 1 through 8, and the vision that he saw, that these first four horsemen are symbolic of spirits that will control the ideologies of mankind in the end time. The white is symbolic of Catholicism. The red is capitalism or socialism. The black is the red is communism or socialism. The black is capitalism. And the green, the pale or green horse is Islamism. Well, because of that, I taught a lesson a few years ago at my prophecy conferences called the Antichrist Socialistic Kingdom, because the Bible says that the Antichrist in the seven-headed, ten-horned beast, which is the world government in the Bible, that in Revelation 17:3, which is talking about the destruction of the end-time world religious system, and it identifies the end-time world religious system, who will be at the helm of that. In Revelation 17:3, the Bible says, John, I'm going to show you, come with me, I'm going to show you the destruction of this. In verse 3, it says, and he took me away into the wilderness, and I saw a woman sitting on the back of a scarlet-colored, seven-headed, ten-horned beast. It's showing that this world government is going to be a red or a communistic or socialistic one world governing beast. Well, the new American is the modern day old John Birch Society. Remember, the communists here in America started demonizing the John Birch Society because they said the John Birch Society was communist, when the John Birch Society was actually anti-communist, fighting against them. Well, the John Birch Society kind of went underground, and they reemerged as what today is called the New American. And Alex Newman, I've had him on my program. I've been on his program. And very, very well-read individual. He goes to these meetings, the COP meetings, the Conference of Parties, and the United Nations and all these big meetings. And then he and I like to banter back and forth on it and have interviews and different things. Well, anyway, the New American published an article, The United Nations, a red operation. Now, I don't know if they've been following us or what's going on, because to my knowledge, we're the only ones that talk about the white, red, black, and green as spirits that will control the ideologies of mankind. But the New American published an article, and it said the New American, the United Nations, the seat of this world government that is prophesied about in Revelation chapter 13, 1 and 2. It's a federalization of nations in the end time. The Bible says all the world would wonder after this beast. It's the world government. The United Nations is the seat of that world government, everybody, right now in the earth. And so the New American writes this article, The United Nations, a red or a communistic or socialistic operation. I saw this and I'm like, oh man, I'm using that today. I found this today on the radio, on the internet. So it talks about the United Nations, and I brought this on because I wanted to talk to you about the global cabal, the global cartel, the global system that the global establishment that Donald Trump is fighting, trying to make America great again. It says in this article about the red, the socialistic, communistic, it says perhaps the most important, I'm quoting the article, perhaps the most important fact about the United Nations is that a key figure in it is found in its founding was communist spy Alger Hiss. I'm quoting the article here. Communist spy Alger Hiss, a State Department official here in the United States. It says that Hiss attended the Yalta and Dumbarton Oaks conferences with Franklin Delano Roosevelt that led to the United Nations creation. He was Secretary General at its organizing conference in San Francisco, California, 1945. And it says Hiss would have gotten away with his treason were it not for fellow red or socialistic communistic agent turned Christian conservative Whittaker Chambers, who fingered Hiss for the House Committee on Un-American Activities in August 1948. It says, as the FBI's website explains, Chambers confirmed testimony from former Soviet agent Elizabeth Bentley that Hiss was a Soviet agent as well. Of course, Hiss denied the charge, but that November, Chambers produced microfilm that he had hidden in a pumpkin out on his farm in, it was Westminster, Maryland, and it contained copies of State Department documents with notes on Alger Hiss's handwriting. And because Hiss had denied the espionage accusation, he was charged with he was convicted of perjury and sent to federal prison for 5 years. He escaped espionage charges because the statute of limitations had expired. And so I wanted to bring that up because it talks about the United Nations being a red operation, a socialistic or communistic. These guys use red here. It's going along right along with Bible prophecy, but they're talking about the United Nations. And I want you to understand that I've talked about it many times on the radio. My father-in-law, Irvin Baxter, did for years. But the New American wrote this article talking about exposing Alger Hiss as a communist spy. He was never caught at that because of the statute of limitations had ran out, but he was put in prison for perjury about lying about being a communist spy. And so I wanted to bring that up because now you understand the United Nations is totally a socialistic or communistic one world governing body that has its tentacles around the world. Now President Trump comes on the scene and he says, I want to be America first. So he's got to battle the establishment here in the United States, and he's got to battle the establishment on a global scale that has their arms already wrapped around America. Okay? And they want more and more. They're trying to start squeezing us, and President Trump is saying, no. You say, how'd they get their arms wrapped around America? Why do you think we haven't controlled our southern border all these years? We've got the strongest military on the planet. We haven't done that because we've had many presidents that have been globalist. They totally agree with the United Nations. So under President Obama and President Biden, I'm talking about tens and tens and tens of millions of people have come across our borders, and they're in America. Terrorist organizations, I mean, all kinds of people. And so I'm not saying all of them are bad, but if they came in illegally, they broke the law, okay? And so my point is Trump fighting a national and an international cabal. What are some of President Trump's America First actions against that global establishment? Okay, well, I've listed them here, many of them. President Trump came in and he withdrew the United States from and termination of funding to certain UN organizations. And he is reviewing U.S. support for all international organizations. He's reviewing it. Should we really be doing this? Do these guys support terrorists? Are they part of a terrorist organization? And he's reviewing support for all international organizations. Man, when I heard this, I was doing cartwheels, folks, inside. I'm a little bit too old to be doing cartwheels physically, but if he pulled us out of the Federal Reserve, I will be doing cartwheels in the studio on air, okay? Mark my words, write it down. Today's February 12th. If President Trump somehow gets us and abolishes the Federal Reserve, I will do cartwheels on top of this desk in our studio, okay? You can hold me to that. I may break my leg, but I'm going to do it because we need to abolish the Federal Reserve. And if he pulled us out of the United Nations, I'll do 2 cartwheels. So it's going to be awesome. Okay. What's President Trump doing? So the United States ambassador of the United Nations shall immediately withdraw, from the Paris Climate Agreement under the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change. He's lopping off these big tentacles of the United Nations from around America. All that is a wealth redistribution scheme. And talk about USAID, the Paris Climate Agreement. It was siphoning money out of America, wealth redistribution. It's socialism. Another thing that President Trump has done, he imposed financial sanctions and visa restrictions against the International Criminal Court and their family members who assisted in targeting America and Israel. And the International Criminal Court is part of the world government. He also withdrew from the World Health Organization, which President Biden, he was doing it on his way out of office the first time. President Biden turned around and pushed us right back into it like a drunken sailor. And then Donald Trump comes along and says, no, we're not going to be a part of that. Pull us out. We're not going to allow them guys to eventually dictate to us how we're going to run America. It's not going to happen. President Trump also signed an executive order that directs the Secretary of Defense, who is at Hegseth, to deliver a revision to the Unified Command Plan, assigning the United States Northern Command, it's U.S. NORTHCOM, the mission of sealing the borders of the United States for the purpose of repelling forms of invasion, including unlawful mass migration, narcotics trafficking, human smuggling and trafficking, and other criminal activities. Now you understand. They've done this. Our border, or our military, is down there fighting against the cartels, different people. I think the apprehensions on our border are down 95% now. Think about that. I just posted an article on my Facebook page earlier today that the United States has military planes that are patrolling the area down there, and that again, and tracking the cartel. Our military planes are doing that, and it's because our military is engaged now. We've now said that it says, this is from the Daily Wire, Trump is dead serious about the border. U.S. military using high-tech spy planes to watch the cartels. This is what we're doing on our southern border right now. Well, why didn't Joe Biden do that? He had access to all this, right? Because he was a globalist. He believed in a world governing body. Donald Trump is coming in and saying, no, we're not doing that. And the globalists are crying at the moon, folks. They're howling at the moon. Number 6, he signed another executive order directing the construction of a temporary and permanent physical barriers at the southern border. He's building the wall. He's continuing on with that. President Biden was selling the wall for pennies on the dollar. Donald Trump said, no, we're going to build a wall. We're going to protect our border. This is what the American people elected me to do, and I'm going to do it. Promises made, promises kept. What's President Trump doing? I want you to understand, everybody. I'm coming to a close of my program here, but President Trump is fighting the cabal in America and an international cabal. He's got a lot of pressure on his shoulders. I pray for him all the time because he's doing, the vast majority of it is he's doing exactly what we elected him to do. And so he's pulling us out of many different things. He's also protecting our Second Amendment rights, which the United Nations wants to get rid of gun rights around the world. They don't want us to have the ability to resist anything. President Trump is protecting our rights. He's pulled us out of the UN Human Rights Council, or he's talking about defunding them. UNESCO, UNRWA, I mean, so many things, trying to be America first, but he's fighting it on two tiers, national and international. I wanted to bring that to you today because I want you to understand what President Trump is doing is very prophetic.